Today's show is a welcome return of Aoife Nally. Today she's going to be talking about her great uncle, who was a playwright, and this famous play that was could not go ahead because the Easter Risings in 1916 in Dublin, as a very interesting, strange story. And we go down this idea of the sort of epigenetics of families and how that could be looked upon as a curse, with the cursed play and so on. So it's a fascinating episode. So without further ado. Yes. Okay. There's a bit of swishing sound, but we can deal with that one. So, Aoife, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Yeah.
Cool. Welcome back, as they
Thank
say.
you so much. It's great to be here. Yeah.
Right. So I thought this time we'd speak a little bit about your great uncle, isn't it?
Yep. Great uncle.
Oh, your great uncle. Yeah.
He's just that great. He's doubly great.
Yes, I am. I'm a great uncle as well.
Oh, no way.
Yes. And that's what I normally say. Why have only one great when you can have two?
Exactly.
Cool. So you got some nice artwork behind you. This one of yours, I guess, is it?
Yeah. This is Gemini from our last ceremony.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I
We're,
can see now. Yes, on the arm.
do you see that? The
Yeah.
tattoo and the twin action, and the constellation is there in butterflies as well.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant stuff. Oh.
yeah, and you can see that Cancer's coming in behind. We've got the moon coming in, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's about to take over. So
Right.
as of
So,
tomorrow.
so
Yep.
that will completely befuddle everybody who's just listening to the audio, but
Yes.
there will be a video version of this. Right. So yes, your great uncle.
Hmm.
So we did talk sort of. I think we just sort of touched on this
Yeah.
when you were on last, which was a little while back now,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. Just to remind, his name is Thomas Hussein Nally. And I don't understand the Hussein because it's an Arabic word meaning the bringer of light or something beautiful like that. And I'm thinking, how in Edwardian Ireland and County Ball, West Mayo, did he get the name Hussein? But yeah.
Well, people did actually have quite elaborate names
Mm.
back then, didn't they?
Yeah, it's probably
Uh,
biblical. A beautiful name.
yeah, and I think we've just got a bit boring.
Yeah.
I think that's how it works.
Okay.
So tell me about tell me about him.
Yeah. I'm just getting to know him, but I'm deep in the meeting, so it's great. He was around in his prime around 1916 Dublin. So he's born late 1800s in County Mayo, west of Ireland, and he was a fascinating man. He was a chemist by training, like a biochemist. They said medical engineer at the time, so at the forefront of medicine. But he was also an anthropologist. He was collecting old mythologies from people in the Wild West, and he was also a playwright for the Abbey Theatre. They say you can tell in his writings that he had a quick and curious mind, like a restless sort of mind, self-taught in everything he did. So I've been in the National Archives in Ireland and gone through all his papers. Well, almost all. There's thousands of pages, but I've taken a photo of each and I'm slowly poring over them. But he was an expert in so many different things. it's kind of remarkable. Like nowadays we can Google this and that and this and kind of make ourselves expert, but this guy was trawling through libraries and people's stories and going, and he did a whole book on traditional dyes in Ireland. So he was really trying to save the culture when the Cultural Revolution was happening. So he was working with WB Yeats at the Abbey, Lady Gregory. I have letters from them both. He would have known Synge, probably would have met James Joyce occasionally. He was known to sit in on rehearsals. So I like to think of him as the sort of Forrest Gump of the Irish Cultural Revolution, in that he was there witnessing and taking part, but in this sort of background, quiet way. I know that the National Irish Library have many sketches of him because the Irish Abbey Theatre, the Irish National Theatre, were preparing to make an oil painting of him. So he was expected to be a great playwright or an asset to the nation. So they were planning that. Unfortunately, the play that he was meant to premiere, The Spancel of Death, which notorious now, considered cursed, at the time was a telling of peasant superstition, a retelling of his family member in 1777. So he's writing about the West Country dark magics and the women's magics, trying to overcome the English landlords and the overlords at the time, the oppressors. So he was writing this really subversive play about the witches winning, which is unheard of, and so much dialogue for women, speaking out against the church, speaking out against power, just wildly subversive. So he was preparing this play, and he is so exacting in his detail that he had the name of the butler, the name of the blacksmith who turned the anvil. He had that time period. His letters between him and Yeats. Yeats was saying to him, "Thomas, please don't put the real names in. This might bring shame upon family lines. We don't want that in the National Theatre." And my uncle's like, "The lines are done. This is a notorious situation. I'm going with the real names because people need to know." So we have this scientist, academic, wonderful mind writing this hyper accurate retelling of a notorious magical event that happened in what was his hometown in 1777. So he's writing it in like 1910, 1912, and for a few years then after. And he's collecting from living memory as much as he can. So that gives you an idea of the kind of man he was. And his footnotes are just an art form in themselves. And the first, when you read the first page, it says based on absolute fact, right? So when I went back for the commemorations in 2016, I went right to the Abbey Theatre and to meet this uncle of mine, to find this figure that was writ large in my life as a cursed footnote to Irish history. And I met the descendants of the people that would have been in his plays, that would have been in that theatre, all gathering to make this plaque for the rebellion. And they weren't going to let me in the door, and I pointed to the poster on the front wall that's been there for decades, and I went, T.H. Nally, Spancel of Death. That is my uncle. I am a descendant. Let me in the door. So I got in the family picture of all these surviving people, of this wonderful, these wonderful actors and artists who went into the streets, guns in hand, to overthrow the colonizers. And it was just thrilling to be there and meet the people. And his play had it gone on, because it was scheduled for Easter week, April 25th, 1916, and the Rising started that weekend. All the plays were cancelled, and the play got lost in time. And the letters that follow between Yeats and my uncle are really fascinating, because he's saying, you promised to put on this play, you promised, and Yeats is going, there's been a rising, there's been blood in the streets, people do not need this amount of subversion, this amount of ignition. They need to be calm. They need Oscar Wilde. They need comedies and lightness to heal the souls, because the great poet Yeats is just, he saw that National Theatre as the psyche of the nation, and where we all went to project, think, figure out, build the new culture that was erupting through the cracks of the old industrial complex. So it was really fascinating to revisit that. And so I was invited into the archives as a descendant, and just because one of those rebellious actors returned to the theater to collect the gun underneath their dressing room table. They happened to return a script, and because of that very polite and wonderful actor, my uncle's script still exists. So I was able.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing twist, isn't it?
Yeah. I was like, thank you. So I have a picture of every page, and have since done 2 staged readings, both in magically potent places. One in Wilton's Music Hall, which is wildly haunted.
Yes, I know Wilton's.
Yeah, right. It's a great place, and we had a lot of, because the play is considered cursed, right? Everyone who's tried to put it on it's fallen apart, it hasn't worked, or they haven't done the full thing, or it's not been picked up. Like this, since its inception, like the few critics who read it in 1916 said it was the goriest play ever written. So the actual play is written about a country witch encouraging a young girl to do a hideous act of necromancy that includes like anti-crucifixion, defiling a corpse, digging up the woman's goddaughter to do all sorts of nefarious things, which actually happened. And
we'll get into the detail on that, because
yeah. So playing that in the East End, the closest location you can to where Jack the Ripper defiled so many women, like the Jack the Ripper Museum you could see it out the window, and having so much restless spiritual energy in the play, it was wildly unstable. And I had 4 days and an incredible group of Irish actors who are sensitive beyond belief anyway. Like an Irish actor compared to any other kind of actor, I find can turn on a dime emotionally, spiritually, like that, laughing to crying and zero to 60. It's incredible working with a completely Irish cast. And it had to be because the dialect is so exact. And it is like a time machine. The whole thing is so accurate. So we had a lot of spiritual interference in the room. There was this one strange thing. Every time we said the date 1777, we had this sound like a finger on the rim of a wine glass. So in the room, we just hear this swipe go, and we would always just stop and take a breath. And then we'd continue 1777. So it's just like the strangest thing. And there's a lot of sevens and planetary magics and stuff in it. So, and we had things flying off mantelpieces and a lot of unrest, and several actors couldn't handle the impact of the play and actually had to leave. So I ended up restaging with less actors for the last day with the strongest of the bunch that could remain. Several of whom have never acted again, but I don't think that's the curse. And then I did a second reading in Treadwell's magical bookshop in the basement.
Okay.
And that in itself, because again,
yes,
there are spirits at large there, and ceremonies done there, and there are books that are alive on the shelves there, and that was really interesting for the actors to keep them grounded. Especially the lead girl has a really huge journey that has to descend into madness, and she basically destroys herself. It's already hard on a good day. So I think it was quite effective for the audience because we just brought them into a basement, locked them in around a tarot table with all these magical implements and wax on the floor, and it was like there was no escape. It's relentless. And I think people, as they walked out, they went, oh my God, wait, I thought I was in a stone cottage somewhere. I thought I heard wind. We're in a bookstore. Like they really, they really did get lost. I mean, we burnt peat, and we prepared the room magically, did ceremony to open it up, and in the end, the play can be performed if the women that died and were harmed and named in the play, if they're honored with a separate altar and ceremony, then you can do the play without harm to your cast. But you do have to be mindful that every single person is real, named, and may still be at unrest, including my uncle, whose dream was never fulfilled. But I think through my work, and my work as a playwright and my work as an occult theater maker, he has absolute permission to work through and with me. So I think he's quite happy now. But it was hard at the beginning because his soul was quite just jumpy, disturbed, kind of startled. He was a very sensitive man, very nervous kind of energy. So that was challenging at first to work with him reviving the play. And sometimes I have to say, okay, you just go have a rest. I'm going to cast the play. We're good. But it's been an incredible journey of ancestral magic and healing my own, the epigenetic trauma of getting a work of art to the stage, getting a completed work, having the faith to know that it'll be finished, it'll be received. There's a huge feeling of unfinished in my family line, and that curse is hung heavy. So it's the more I do for him, I'm doing for myself. Like it is wildly healing, and to go to the places where he wrote, and now to have a relationship with Yeats, like the man on the other side of this, the producer who didn't produce the like when I went to the Yeats Society in Sligo, I thought, I'm essentially a heretic. Like Yeats owes me. I'm kind of pissed at this guy. He let my family down. I thought, are they going to let me in? Or are they going to slam the door in my face? Because the letters back and forth get quite heated, and my uncle ended very badly, being transported from Ireland to New Zealand for his own protection. So he's transported, basically.
Okay, let's there's lots of things I want to.
Yeah, sorry, it's a huge story. It's hard to say it like.
So the first thing is, obviously you've referred to this as being very dark necromantic magic.
For real, yeah.
So tell me a little bit about some of the details, because it's pretty gory, isn't it?
It is pretty gory. It's interesting because now I know the play better. The witch, her name is Judy in the play, Judy Julian. So we have a cup of tea set aside for her today. She claims to have turned the anvil. Now this is a thing they did in the West Country and probably all over Ireland, where the seventh son of a blacksmith. So if 7 sons have been blacksmiths and 7, they can turn the anvil 7 times, and you can create irresistible magic. So she claims to have turned the anvil 7 times to call the next governess of the big house. So Moore Hall, which still exists, and I've just been to, which has now been burnt down by people wanting revenge, is actually a wildly esoteric place, and it had a big magical library in it. And I actually mourned when I saw it. When I saw the esoteric writings over the walls, I'm like, oh, it was an enlightened landlord. Oh, shit. Anyway, it wasn't always enlightened. So some of the darker, badder landlords that were starving people and taking advantage, the particular landlord at that time had been seducing governesses and leaving them side of the road with children that would not have been accepted by the community. They would have been eating grass side of the road, dead in no time. So the witch's goddaughter, Ellen, and her daughter were left at the side of the road by that landlord. So Judy turned this anvil and went, next god, next woman who comes, bring her to me. So this beautiful young woman, Sibby Cottle, shows up at her door saying, I don't know why I came to you, but I'm the new governess at the big house. And Judy puts in her head, like, he's throwing away all these women. You have enemies within the staff there. You need my help. I can make him fall in love with you and keep your job safe. And of course, this innocent young thing who'd been through how many houses takes her up. So they do an initial spell just with 7 reed candles over 7 nights. And he falls in love with her. He probably would have anyway. And she has about 3 children. 5 years later, the young landlord, so Harry Lynch Bloss, he was starting to get letters from his great aunt saying, we have to marry you off. We don't have money for the estate. Get rid of that, your one, get rid of your side piece, and we'll give her a little money, but don't name the children. And they're off. So Sibby runs to Judy and says, I'm out on the street. There's nothing I can do, la, 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 la. So Judy, who may or may not have been planning this for years, she's very much a spider in the web, like everything, all these machinations seem to be ready to go. And she goes, well, you have to do this really notoriously dangerous spell called the Spancel of Death. And for those of you who don't know what a spancel is, it's a hoop that hobbles cows or horses. So it's a hoop you can put around their feet so they can't walk forward or back. But the Spancel of Death is that hoop, is that cobble, but it's made of human skin. So Judy and she has a dark son and a bright son. She's the village idiot, and then this notorious criminal. They dig up the body of her own goddaughter's daughter, who's just recently died. And it's all done under certain moons, a certain time of year. It's right on Samhain. It's right on this, all these magical portals. And the witch has a dumb book, this really notorious book of old Irish magic that she's referring to. And the priests are trying to come and get the book away from her. And she's like, she's got it. She's never giving it away. And she's cursing people hither and thither. And she gave a love potion to the priest's sister, and he's furious. So there's all these magical happenings. The sons bring the body of this young, recently dead girl, who probably starved to death from just lack of sustenance. She teaches the girl with a black hafted knife, 7 candles and all these 7s and 7s, that she has to essentially carve the girl from heel to shoulder and back to the heel again without breaking the hoop. That's and my uncle, he writes this in bold description, and he has this red pen around it and these asterisks saying, well, this might be too much for an audience, so if you feel you have a sensitive audience, I would cut this out and jump to this point. And I'm like, an Edwardian audience on Easter week in Dublin wanting some escapism, and they get an anti-crucifixion, so they've got this girl hung upside down being peeled, and I'm like, described, which is so much worse. And when I did it in Wilton's Music Hall, we had the girl herself lying down and being, the witch is showing her where she'll peel. And being slightly dyslexic or brilliant, I got all the directions wrong, and we actually did it backwards. And the play was very much cursed at that point. And I think I may have broken the curse in that moment by doing everything the right way up by accident. I just couldn't find north that day. But I think that was on purpose. It was really, really quite a horrible thing to stage. And there were vials of blood. And once the skin is removed, you make the hoop by weaving this thing that Irish women do to make belts, and out of 7 silk flosses, one for each of the classical planets, with this black thrown in. And so she made this beautiful hoop. It would look like a tie on a curtain in a beautiful home. And the girl had to go away with this thing, spend a few nights with it hobbled around his feet and hers while he slept, so he couldn't have seen this happen. And once those 3 to 7, I can't remember how many nights, the woman would have to wear it around the waist as long as she wanted, the rest of her life, as long as she wanted to be attached to this man. So Sibby Cottle did this. He fell absolutely in love, never married. This is all true, absolute fact. To this day, the hall was never passed on. The money never went anywhere but to her. So this is why people still talk about this notorious event. And the girl wore this human flesh around her waist for the rest of her life. He died quite early. He went quite mad. And the girl herself having trying to live with this, her soul just disintegrated, and she went absolutely insane. And the priests that came to see her while she thrashed in madness and death, there's three endings to the play. One where they give her some salvation. There's one where they damn her to hell, and there's a third one where they can do neither. So you get to choose. In real life, the priest didn't go near her, and she died alone, mad, insane, driven to distraction. And the belt that was around her waist after she died was brought to the church and nailed to one of, not the altar, but one of the chapels, to say that witchcraft was evil and madness and death follow revenge. And later it disappeared from the church in Balla, County Mayo, which you can still visit. And it was brought by the witch herself and put in the chimney breast of her home. And so I end it with the witch taking the belt from the dead girl and like raising it in triumph, going, this is what she wanted all along. Her revenge works. She wins. The priests are insulted, cursed, and sent away. Like I can't believe a play in that era was allowed to say that. It was so subversive. But why my uncle was obsessed with this story, he grew up in that town, but his great uncle was the one that found that hoop of human skin in the chimney breast of that witch's house when they were tearing it down. He was a structural engineer, so he had held it in his hand, the cursed object. And my uncle, as a child, looking at this thing, for the rest of his life was like, what is that? The Spancel of Death. So it was, it's grotesque, it's gory, it's terribly sad, like even more than the revenge. You get this sad story of desperate women willing to do anything to overcome. The witch's husband was sent away to New Zealand or Australia for stealing one sheep, And when I stage it, I tell the people the stakes are incredibly high. Like, by saying one word against the landlord, anyone could be listening at those eaves. You could be hanged for stealing a turnip. And it's hard to get modern actors to understand that when a woman is sent away, spurned, that it means death. Like it's not like, oh, you've broken up, you'll find another man. It is, the community won't feed you. You'll die side of the road with your children. So we have to work really hard on one word wrong and you're on the gallows,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Your sound just dipped out for about 2 seconds there. It was a bit weird.
Okay.
Anyway, so I'm quite intrigued, obviously, about this, about your great uncle.
Yeah.
Because obviously he was, quite a polymath.
Yeah.
And not only was he, you can imagine somebody who's a polymath now, not being interested in anything like that because they just sort of thought it was all a bit sort of crazy. But obviously, growing up in a place where that story was notorious.
Yeah.
And it is, and typical with the sort of folk magic. I don't like that word, but you know what I mean.
I know. We need a better word. Indigenous
folk magic traditions. It's a bit like discovering magical traditions in any roots society.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not very tidy.
I tell you, Irish magic still isn't tidy.
No, but you know what I'm saying?
I've just been there and it's still very feral and they're re-indigenizing and they're really, there's a renaissance. It's so exciting, but it's got teeth. Like it isn't not a well-behaved magic on a good day.
That's what I'm saying. It's the fact, I thought that was a great word, feral.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Because, that would be the same with hoodoo and stuff like that, just like, and of course, we always, the problem is we tend to come at things from a very sort of tidy, we don't want to frighten anyone, we don't want to do any harm.
Very, I think at the time my uncle may have been with Yeats in the early Golden Dawn as well. Some of their writings match up for thoughts, and I think he wanted the tidy temple, and I think he loved the systems and the elegance of that. But I don't think he could deny he was from the Wild West, and he's poor Catholic, and Yeats is coming in with this upper class esoteric. So the two of them meeting is sort of a larger picture for Ireland in general, Yeah,
that's interesting because if you think of Yeats's interaction with Crowley, that was you could see that would have been a bone of contention really because of if he didn't want it to be, how can I put it? If Yeats's thing was he wanted it to be a little bit tidier and not so esoteric. Well, to be esoteric.
Yeah.
You could see that because I nearly said to you, maybe if Crowley was putting on the production, it probably would have gone ahead.
Yeah, I've had the astrology done on the birth date of the play, and the astrologer, who is quite a tough guy, he looked at it and he went, "Oh my God!" He goes, "If Yeats hadn't stopped this play, someone else would have had to." He goes, "This could not have gone on." It's like, yeah, and I think Yeats wanted that wild Irish. He wanted what my uncle had. And my uncle wanted what Yeats had. Like, he was desperate to become a gentleman. And you can see his grocery lists on the side of the play going, starch my collar, I have to polish my shoes, I have to buy more pins for my suit. The two of them, I'm just fascinated on how they would have interacted. But you have to remember, Yeats underestimated the Irish. Like, he did not perceive the rising coming, and he was putting on these plays, pushing people, really not expecting them to rise up with the dignity, theatricality, poetry that they did. And
do you think there was an element of that with him and also Lady Gregory, that they were doing a lot of releasing the old stories without realizing quite what they were doing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Because I'm just wondering whether that, because it's all very sort of gentrified is the word I'm looking for, or convivial. You know what I mean?
My great uncle, he has a play. He has a little scrap of a play called Genius in the Making, and it's got a few characters: Lady Little Wit, the poet Sting, and these three aristocrats come to a bohemian's apartment, a tenement, demanding high tea. And the man, just before they walked in, has been contemplating suicide, but he couldn't afford a razor to slit his wrists. And he's made these caricatures of these three aristocrats swanning in, going, "Well, why isn't there cake?" Like the way it was described to me, the Abbey rebels, the actors, were shopkeepers, were undertakers, policemen. None of them could be professional artists throughout the day, but they would watch these great billowing overseers come in with all this esoteric loveliness, but they weren't always that connected to what was happening in the streets, and never really understand the feral nature. But we're desperate for it. Like, you go to the places. I've been to the Isle of Innisfree, looking where Yeats wrote, and I was thinking, I don't think he could really live on that island without a few servants and the honey being shipped over in the morning.
Yes.
But the want of to release the wildness and to take part in the wildness was very real, and I appreciate that. And they definitely saw, smelt, could feel the magic, and I took the two parts to release the explosive rise. I'm grateful for both, but it's wild coming from my uncle's perspective and knowing he had to borrow 2 pence from the priest to have strawberries for an Easter morning, begging Yeats to put on the play that he'd already promised, and just how important it was to my uncle for his work to survive, but for him to survive. He was threadbare with 5 separate jobs and was a brilliant mind that just couldn't get the help he needed. So it's just really interesting playing with the 2 polarities and studying the Golden Dawn and all of that privileged magic, and then to work with the wild magic of what the people could make. It's a fascinating time.
That's amazing. So I'm assuming that you knew the details of this from a very early age.
No.
Or you just knew about this play?
No, I don't know if all families are like this, but Irish families kind of work in myths. Like, I once stubbed a toe and I was called Aoife of the 9 toes for like a year. Like, we just speak in mythology naturally. So the story that I grew up with was that my uncle was this revolutionary playwright who wrote this famous play. And the day before the Rising, his play was cancelled, and he was the last one with the key, turning in the lock of the Abbey Theatre before it was shelled by a boat on the Liffey. And, in my mind, like, glass blew up, the theatre burnt down, and my uncle was, like, running from the theatre like some Tom Cruise movie. And in reality, like, the Abbey has, like, 2 bullet holes. My uncle would never have had the key, It was just... it was writ large in my mind that this famous thing, and then how cursed, and Irish people have what I call, and this is essentially me, but I call it the long remembering blood, and I think it comes from generations and generations and generations of deep oral history, in that you hold stories in the body to an extraordinary event. So a curse means that we'll feel it down the line for generations. And you might just, I still have an auntie out in the Wild West who's like, that family once stole a sheep from us. We don't speak to them. And you're like, why can't you let that go? We can all have as many sheep as we want now. Why does your blood still boil when that person, who's not even the person, but 3 generations from the person who stole that sheep? It seems so extraordinary. And it was a big healing moment for me when I'm like, well, I have that long remembering blood. Maybe when I can't let something go, it's genetic, and I should forgive myself and speak to that blood and go, it can go now. You can have your sheep, or that horse that he stole. Like, just let it go. But knowing that it is part of the generational trauma and gifts, like, I can also remember beauty and poetry, and I can speak to my uncle as if he's in the room. Like, I feel him. I absolutely can see him polishing his little pebble glasses, pacing the room. I sometimes, he and I are so close in personality. I'm like, where does one end and the other begin? We're just working in concert. So that's also a gift to the long remembering blood. I hold him with me. I don't know if every culture's like that, because I can only speak for my own at this moment. But
I did a couple of little solo podcasts about epigenetics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Huge.
And I did one called The Genetics of Thinking, which is really, is in your sort of frame there, where it's almost like your operating system. You don't realize that your thinking is predicated on this stuff, which is, your parents' thinking, your grandparents' thinking, and everything. And, and of course, you could look at it and go, well, you witnessed your parents making decisions in a particular way.
Sure.
But it's not a conscious thing.
Yeah.
But it's actually probably easy just to think, as you say, like, it's an epigenetic thing.
Yeah.
Where, your decisions are predicated on something that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And, that was one of them. And the other thing is about, and obviously this has got relevance as you're talking about Ireland, even more than it has here.
Yeah.
Where we have ways of thinking that are baked into sort of Christian thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't even realise that that's happening. I mean, science is a good example. This idea of, you want this sort of grand unifying theory. It's almost like, well, we've got to find God, so let's keep looking. I mean, the essence of it is the same. This idea that everybody's looking for the light or enlightenment or the logos. So, I mean, they're all the same. They're all a spin on the same thing about, well, we don't want darkness, we just want light.
Yeah.
And you think, well, if you go back into some cultures, it doesn't work like that. They're not all looking for the light. They're looking for, they're looking for the moon sometimes. And sometimes they need the darkness. I mean, look at some of the shamanic cultures where young kids live in total darkness for a number of years, before gradually they're reintroduced into light.
Oh, wow.
Because they are and you think, well, so it's not all of us looking for that, but it's in our thinking. We're looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. We're looking for the, and you think that's sort of weird, especially when it gets sort of contradictory. Like when that same term is used by, maybe the Catholics talking about getting rid of the pagans, and then it's the Protestants getting rid of the Catholics. They're still using the same term, and then it's the science, the Enlightenment period. And it was that type of thing, and that's just one example. But I think it's that type of thing is there, and you're saying about that when you can see it, in a family line, and that suddenly when you realise that that's happening. It starts to show lots of other things, doesn't it? You start to become aware of so much.
Well, yeah, and I have the added benefit that my family moved to Canada. 1969, my parents came. So I'm not in the country, so it's not a given. There's more fights in this house about food waste, food shortage. And we had some food insecurity when I was younger, young immigrant parents working how many jobs to survive. It wasn't always easy, and there was always an awareness. But now when Canada's been extraordinarily good to us, we have more than we can have. But still, a spilt milk situation can be a humongous uproar in the house. And I've always had that contrast with 1970s Canada's, everyone's great, and it was quite an optimistic time, but my family brought the trauma with them. And I was always wondering about food, like, why are we so worried everyone's got some, and it's only as my parents are sharing later in age that I realized that famine was a living reality.
Yes.
Not just 1845 or the Depression or the war, but actually my mother's family went without food days on end. The kids would have sour milk from the school canteen, and whatever the lunch ladies would give them, they would often have like a raisin bun for the day. So really, I didn't know that because it didn't translate to this world I'm in. I'm super glad we are here. I think it was very healing to move, but and I wouldn't want to grow up anywhere else really. And it's given me a view of Ireland like that I have a distance in that I can heal some things.
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, this is really interesting because my parents were old when they had me.
Oh, okay.
Right. So my brothers and sisters are old enough to be my parent.
Oh.
So my mother said that she was born in 1912, I think it was. Anyway, my dad was born in 1910. So my mother said that she might have been born in 1914, I can't remember anyway. But she said that when she was at school, she said poverty was something. I think they didn't suffer from poverty. But her thing was that, you went to school with people who didn't have any shoes and socks.
Yeah.
There was no such thing as underwear. They didn't have underwear. So poverty was a very real thing, and hunger was something that was there. So they weren't that, and they were, particularly my father was very, no food to be wasted. And that was something, because it was within their living memory.
Yeah.
And I would say that, the fact that we've now got an overabundance of food, it's that very thing that causes the obesity that we have now.
Oh.
It's the fear of, because people eat the most extraordinary amounts of food, don't they?
Oh my God, yeah. We actually overeat as a culture.
Of course we do.
And like,
I
eat 3 times a day. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, but it's not even the fact that people are eating 3 times a day. It's the fact that one meal is actually 3 meals.
Oh, wow.
Because you've only got to go out and see what people eat. They'll have a starter.
Yeah.
They'll have a main course. And they'll have a pudding. Well, a pudding is a meal. Isn't it? If you think about it, there's enough nutrition in that to last you for a long time. And they've had coffee, probably with milk in it, which is effectively a meal.
Well, you're saying...
and beer. I mean, there was a time that if you had a pint of beer, that was it. Beer and
eat like medieval cattle barons is what you're saying.
Yes.
Like I remember someone saying, the poorest person now is richer than the medieval lords. Like we have, even people who are living on the edge might have 3-4 pairs of shoes, might have a change of clothes. It's like,
yes.
I don't think we know how well we have it while we have it, because the earth is, it's changing mind. I won't say it lacks abundance, but it's it might not be so generous coming up. So
exactly, and I think that is the thing that maybe there's an awareness of that.
Yeah.
The fact that there isn't, and things are cyclic anyway. Let's face it. We're going through one of those periods of time. Like, I've jokingly said, okay, so which is the next horseman of the apocalypse to turn up?
Why are you saying that out loud?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about that, but you know what I mean. It's just, you look at that and you think, well, we've got a plague. Okay. So. Oh
my God. I think, and I have friends with the monkeypox, and they're saying, now I have the real plague. Like, this feels like an actual plague. Like, who needs a pox, right?
Yeah, exactly. Put a pox on your house. There's even sort of things that, So, so I think that's it. That's a really fascinating point.
It's huge. And I would say to anyone who comes to me for particular healing or reading, I'll do what I can, but really I would like to send them. I think the highest form of healing is ancestral, and really once you know what's yours and what's theirs, and getting that family line in order, facing forward, working on your behalf as opposed to working against you. Like if you look at my line, they were all facing different directions. There were infights. There was like chaos in the line. And I'm like, I'm the arrowhead and I need a shaft. I need someone back there being the feathers. If I'm going to move the consciousness of this family and the potential and send forward to 7 generations ahead, all the goodness that we can give. Like my people are tough survivors. They were thugs. They were poets. They were rebels. Like I have a huge energy available that I want to pass on to my nephews, to their children, to the grandchildren beyond that. Like, I don't want to waste this unbroken Celtic magic. And when I go back, I can feel the availability of that surplus, but it needs to be channeled, understood, spoken to, honored, and occasionally scolded, because, ancestors can misbehave and get in the way and, past that fear of failure or that curse down the line. Like my uncle's nerves weren't helpful when I was trying to put the play up. So I had to, as a kind descendant, say, you have to step aside if you want this play to go on. Like it was almost tripped up how many times, and almost didn't get the cast together, and almost, 2 actors lost the plot and left. And I'm hanging on white knuckle to the reins of this play going, it is going on. I am breaking this curse. And it took an amazing force of will. And I packed that audience with magical bigwigs and friends and people with oomph to hold that and just decide. And it was only when I got to that moment going, the witch is in this, and she is active, she is angry, and the corpse that was defiled, and that young girl who was so badly used by all sides. Once I got into the center of that, the play is no longer about this curse and this rising and this betrayal by Yeats and all of that energy. Now it's about three or four, five desperate women, all the women of Ireland. It's become a real sort of feminist cry of using wild magic to take down these institutions. And if you look at Moore Hall now, where this whole play, was facing at this big house, they were throwing this magic, absolutely burnt down. It's like the shell. It's like you can see the tangible aspect of the magic on the walls. You can see the flames and the they did persevere.
That's an interesting point, because again, going back to sort of practical magic of the people, something that it was a thing to inoculate a house, particularly barns, against fire. And of course you would inoculate by singeing posts and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
So, and that is of that period, 18th century, that was quite typical. Most of that is seen from people who've emigrated away from the British Isles. You see it a lot in places like Australia and yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
But it would have been done as a regular thing.
Now, if you go back to Ball County, Mayo, where that family, where the Nallys were from, I just went back on a curse tour. So I went to all the cursed places in the play just to check in. And I had this old taxi driver, and I'm like, we're going on a curse tour. And his language got so blue. And he's using the slang that is in my uncle's play from hundreds of years ago. And he's Amadan, and he goes, if I feel a tap on my shoulder and some little creature is telling me to go, I'm going to turn away and curse you too. And so we went to all these places, and my uncle's house, that was, because his previous generation worked for the landlords, collected rents and helped with evictions, and were basically the thugs for the English overlords. That house has been cursed. So they have carved in the lintels the horrible wishes. They've buried horse heads under the door. They've salted the land around it. So my family manse, beautiful big house. I mean, they were clearly in cahoots, because who could afford this beautiful two gabled house on this beautiful piece of land with a turlough and grazing for horses. To this day, I've made friends with the farmers, but I climbed the gate, and the whole town knew about it. The whole town knew within seconds that a Nally had been on Nally property, and they forgave me because I put on my eager Canadian act, my Aji, and I didn't mean any harm for real. I was just trying to get a better picture and to offer some goodwill and try and bring some of the evolution of the family back. I was really genuinely trying to undo this any harm that we did. And I brought it to the Hill of Ishnok. I'm just like, please forgive, the people that had to work for the overlords to survive. What about those nasty tax collectors that got buried up to their neck in the bogs? Now, thankfully, because of my uncle and his brother Patrick W. Nally, who saved Irish sport and Irish music, he was huge. The generation turned around, and there was suddenly full of enlightened, good men who cursed the landlord, would no longer work for them. They left the Wild West, moved to Dublin, became intellects and proper revolutionaries. I don't know what turned on a dime, if it was just one step too far. There was a story that the desecration of the landlord's grave, they turned the cross upside down, and they blamed my family for this. and they were sent out of town, but nobody knows. Nobody knows, but they became good men. So in the town, there's a huge monument praising the family for saving Irish culture, being great rebels, dying in British prisons on behalf of the Irish Republic. And then there's this cursed house that people still spit on as they walk. And the driver wouldn't approach it. And he said, now I know why I get shivers up my back every time I pass this house. He goes, we shouldn't be on this land, you know? So this is real contrast in my family line. And I still feel like I'm kind of making up for the thuggery and the grumpy-nallies, as they were called. And yeah, and I'm like, but we're also poets and we're also magicians, and you know.
Yeah, but that's it's just.
It's a big line to hold, I'll tell you. It's a lot of energy that comes down. It's pretty feisty, and the magic is very feral.
Yeah, I think because we've lost that connection with the land in society.
Yeah.
Obviously, in Ireland, they've still got it.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up in Cornwall, there were a lot of people to be aware of things like that. Very suspicious of certain things, people, places.
Yeah.
And that was, there wasn't a big thing made of it. It was just, but it was open.
Yeah.
People would talk about things.
Yeah.
Not in a way that it was sort of weird. It was
Yeah.
just like, you just didn't do that type of thing. You wouldn't go there, or
Yeah.
you'd have to be careful of whatever. And I don't know whether it's like that now.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Cornwall's pretty feral too. I love it there.
Yeah. So
Do you find like the actual land? Because I was in Sligo on a Yeats quest and really feeling him, and I went to his grave, I went to his isle, I went to his homes, and it was so sweeping and poetic, and I'm like, anyone could write poetry here. No kidding. It was very beautiful, and there was space and stones. I adore Sligo. Very, very beautiful. And then I thought, well, I should go. I'm right next door to Mayo, where my people are from, where my uncle is from. I should go. And as I hit Mayo, the land had just turned to sharp stones sticking hither and thither, like teeth coming out of the land, and clearly much poorer and not fertile. And you could tell the food growing there would be impossible. Like even the sheep were kind of tiptoeing around looking for, I mean, I'm exaggerating for effect, but I just felt the hardness in comparison. I'm like,
yeah,
my people were hard. They came from a hard place. And when the English used to transport people, they would say to hell or Connacht, that county. They would be like, we could send you overseas, or we can send you to Mayo. And you can try and live there. You can scrabble up what you can on that land. I'm like, I had no idea. And it made a lot of sense why sometimes I have a hardness. Sometimes I have those teeth that doesn't make sense in Canada, in this beautiful Amish agricultural gorgeousness with so much food and abundance and ease. And I had to see it for myself. And I climbed Kirkpatrick, which is this holy pilgrimage, and it's bloody hard. I was like, oh my God, my ancestors climbed that barefoot. And my cousin would talk about her mother coming down with torn feet, like torn to ribbons, blood on the stones, up and down. And I did what my ancestor would have done. Like I did the penance, and I just mostly I couldn't believe that anyone could have sinned that much in the world to have to do that to themselves. But it was an extraordinary communion with my line, and just how and why they saw life so hard, and what they had to survive.
well,
It released me from so much,
I think because obviously Ireland is, it's always been difficult having Wales and England as your neighbour.
Yeah.
It's troublesome.
Yeah.
So it's like, I suppose it's like being in a bottle with a couple of hornets, really.
Oh no, Yes, yeah. I mean, I see it as two halves of one heart that hurts itself because there is actually love, and it is energetically, if you line up the ley lines and the stone circles, they're actually one system
Yes,
that's been at battle with itself. Um,
yes.
and I have the way I get through because I'm regaining my indigeneity. My guides call it rewilding, so they keep sending me back to Ireland to get feral on purpose. And how I find compassion for the British people that I love. I've lived in England 20 years, and I have my friends are British. I love them. Um, I just remember how badly the British were smashed by the Roman culture and how their Celticness was absolutely torn from them and still hasn't been regained. And I'm like, if I had a hat, if I had a revolution, I'd be like, make Britain Celtic again, like let's bring back the natural magic. And
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, our thing is the fact that once you got the hierarchy that's still in now.
I don't know
I
how you'd
mean,
overcome.
everybody's been messed with, in that way.
Yeah,
And again, it is like you were saying about within the family, where you've got people who are collecting taxes and rents,
yeah,
right? And you think this is against your own people, but of course this always happens, and this is how
yeah,
it's done.
yeah.
It's that you divide people, and then it is in such a way that it's like, well, what's considered as normal,
Mhm.
and you have to survive. Um, and you see it happening all the time. We obviously had it with the Brexit stuff,
Oh my God.
and you listen to what people have been saying, and you think it's just ludicrous. Most of the arguments, and sometimes on both sides, people are
Yeah.
coming out with the most ridiculous things, and you think, well, yeah,
I think for evil to exist, once you have to convince people to dehumanize each other.
yes,
Like I've just been in Belfast as well, and that peace wall is still there for a reason. There's still some extremes that haven't, there's still some open wounds there. Although
yes.
they've come a million miles, and it still gladdens my heart to see glass buildings being built in Belfast. Like I still cry. Like it's amazing, but you know, the fact that Protestant and Catholic, which are so really close, is like you have to dehumanize. You have to make them less.
You do.
You not see them as people anymore. It's so.
Well, it's interesting. There was a friend of mine who was in the SAS,
Mm,
and they referred to the target as the mark.
yeah, yeah,
See, that's how this stuff works. You dehumanize.
yeah.
Those other people over there are not like us.
Mhm.
And so on. And because once you get that way of thinking, then people can do
Yeah,
those sort of things. But again, it's also the same as people who are surgeons. If you looked at somebody that you're cutting up as being, you know, anything other than the patient,
interesting. Yeah,
you know, um,
yeah,
yeah, it's fascinating. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that.
yeah. Have we sorted it out? Have we sorted epigenetics?
Yeah, well, it's especially when it comes into things like art.
Yeah.
We talk about that, and obviously bringing in, well, even that when you're talking about that spell,
Hmm.
there's something incredibly artistic about this hideous thing that they created.
It's beautiful. No, the object itself was absolutely beautiful, and it took such care. And the way the witch speaks to the body, she's almost singing a lullaby, like she's cradling this while she's desecrating, and it's her goddaughter's daughter. It's such a feminine. The logic of that, it's like the darkest
Yes,
mother. It is like the darkest moon, like.
yes, no, I get that, I get that.
And
And
they make this beautiful belt the woman has to wear for the rest of her life. And I've made a Spancel since, not with the human skin on it, but I've used the wrought iron thing that twists the 7 colors. And it is a beautiful, it's a woven, just like Irish people and their knots and their weaving and their storytelling, which is never direct anyway. And it, like you can
no,
tell by mine today, but just bringing all those colors together. And the play is beautiful, and and there's song in it, and there's humor in it, and it's like all good Irish things. It's got a bit of everything in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Brilliant.
not just dark and it's not just light, right?
No, exactly.
Another fact about Ireland is it's got the heaviest gravity in the world. They've measured, probably because of the rock underneath, but I think the lightest people. So I think the dynamic of Irish culture is a fey people on a heavy land. And I think you always get joy and sorrow in equal measure. So that's my.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thanks. Cool.
Thanks.
Well, thank you ever so much.
That was great fun.
Yeah. And as usual, I'll stick some things in the show notes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but nice to see you.
Yeah,
nice to see your artwork in the background. So.
Yeah.
And we haven't even spoken about what you've been up to there, but we'll have to do that as another.
Yeah, come and get me. I'll give you the whole tour.
Yeah, cool. We'll do that next time.
Yeah, sounds fun.
All right.
Take care.